Welcome to the Sorted Out SI League Guide for England, where we'll look at the league structure within Football Manager 2023 and run through a few save ideas if you want to start your career in England. On FM23, England has one of the deepest playable league systems in the game, with 6 levels comprising 7 divisions and a total of 164 playable teams. Now, the season in England, as most of you will probably know, is a traditional European winter season, so runs from roughly August all the way through to May, and so we'll cover all levels of the playable pyramid, including European competition qualification and the vast array of domestic cup competitions. Now, naturally, we're going to start with the top tier, the Premier League. Now, this is a 20-team league which plays a double round-robin schedule for a 38-game campaign. In the first season, England has 7 European qualification places. Obviously, this will change when we get into the new Champions League structure, which you can see a video on here on the channel. 2 of those places are dependent on the domestic cup competitions rather than the regular one, which you'll find in most European competitions. They will be covered when we get to them, but if all 7 places do go to the league, obviously depending on where the winners of the cup competitions finish, the top 4 enter the European Champions League, then 2 teams go into the Europa League and a final team goes into the Europa Conference League. And down at the bottom of the table, there are 3 automatic relegation places, so the bottom 3 all get relegated down to the next tier. Now, one very important thing, which I'm not going to go through into massive detail because you need to read it yourself and get your head around it yourself, but I'll show you on screen. Obviously, I'm showing you already on screen. One thing that's very important you need to keep an eye on when managing England is Brexit and the new Brexit rules and the work permit rules that are there for knock-on effect from them. Take your time to read over them because you'll get very frustrated if you're not used to playing in England since 2021. It's quite different. It's very hard to get work permits for a lot of players. So definitely have a read of these rules that are on screen now. Go into your game and have a look at them yourself. But make sure you keep in mind work permits and the new Brexit rules when managing in England. Right. If we drop down now to the second tier, the EFL Championship, things remain rather similar, honestly, but the league grows to 24 teams and therefore 46 games. The top 2 gain automatic promotion, and then the next 4 teams enter a playoff, with semi-finals being a home and away 2-legged affair, and the final being a single match at the neutral venue of Wembley. The winner gains the final promotion spot, and at the bottom of the table, it's 3 automatic relegations down to the third tier, which follows the same structure of 24 teams as the Championship. This is EFL League 1, but the only change being that 4 teams get relegated automatically from League 1. That's got the knock-on effect to the 4th tier of League 2, which obviously shows that 3 automatic places, promotion places rather than 2, with 4 teams once again going into the same playoff structure as the levels above, but obviously they're finishing 4th to 7th rather than 3rd to 6th. League 2 does, however, only have 2 relegation places, which sees teams falling out of the Football League into non-league football, which is the 5th tier, the National League. Now, the National League continues the 24-team, 46-game structure, but only has a single automatic promotion place for all those 24 teams. The playoff structure is also therefore elongated, with 6 teams moving forward. The teams that finish 2nd and 3rd are given byes into a semi-final, whereas the teams in 4th through 7th therefore have to play an extra round to get there. Due to that extra round stretching things out a little bit, all playoff games are single matches rather than home and away legs. And then at the bottom of the table, there are 4 teams relegated automatically down to the final playable tier, which is the 6th tier, the 2 regional divisions of the National League, the National League North and the National League South. Now, both divisions mimic the structure of the tier above. 24 teams, 1 automatic promotion place, 6 teams going into the playoffs in the same sort of buys for the top 2, extra round for everyone else. The relegation situation is the same as well, with 4 teams from each of the 2 divisions automatically getting relegated down to the unplayable 7th tier, the Trident Leagues, which is step 3 of the non-league system, which we won't go into any detail in because they're not playable in the base game, but you can download a database. There was a video on the website, on your channel here, which took you down to tier 10. So check that out if you want to play further down in the English pyramid. Now, we're going to shift our focus to the domestic cup competitions. Now, we're going to start obviously with the FA Cup. In the base game, this competition starts with a 2nd qualifying round, but this is actually the 4th playable 4th round of the competition. There's a preliminary round, an extra preliminary round, and then the first qualifying round, so forth and so on. In that second qualifying round, the teams from the National League North and South enter, so those 48 teams enter alongside the 112 winners from the previous round, which all consist of teams from unplayable leagues. Then the 24 teams from the National League are added in the fourth qualifying round, so that's added to the 40 teams who have made it that far, if you follow me still. The first round proper sees those 32 teams which have survived so far in the qualifying rounds joined by teams from EFL League 1 and League 2. So that's adding more teams in, another 48 teams. And then the final addition of teams comes in the third round proper with the 20 teams from the Premier League and the 24 teams from the Championship being added in the third round, joining the 20 remaining teams that have survived the second round. And from there, it's a straight knockout through to the final. Each round is now a single fixture, with replays being played in a result of a draw up to and including the fourth round. From the next round onwards, from that, the winner basically goes through to penalties if there's a draw. The winner of the FA Cup will gain a qualification place for the Europa League unless they finish in the top four in the Premier League, and then the place will default to the league, like we mentioned earlier. Now, obviously, this isn't the only domestic cup competition. It's not the only one that has a European place attached to it either. So the next one we're going to cover is the Carabao Cup, the EFL Cup, the League Cup, whatever you want to call it. This is contested between the 92 teams from the top four tiers. 70 of those enter the first round, so that's all of League 1 and League 2, plus 22 teams from the Championship. The second round has those final two Championship teams, which are the highest ranked from the previous season's Premier League, if that makes sense. So the 18th and 19th place Premier League teams that got relegated, they enter in the second round, plus 13 teams from the Premier League, which aren't involved in European competition. And then the third round sees the final 7 teams enter, and then we go through to a final with the winner gaining a Europa Conference League qualification, with that caveat about league position and it dropping into the league. You with me? Right, from the first round through to the quarterfinals, it's just a single match with penalties immediately following a draw, no extra time. Then the semi-finals are spread out a little bit more. They're then two-legged affair with potential for extra time and penalties, and then back to a single match for the final. Again, potential of extra time and penalties at Wembley. Right, cup competitions continue because there's loads of them in England. The next one is the Papa John's Trophy, the EFL Trophy, and this is for clubs specifically in the third and fourth tier. So there are 48 teams in League 1 and League 2, but they are joined by 16 youth teams, under 21s or under 23s, whichever one it is now, of Category 1 academies from teams in the Premier League and Championship. Now, all of these 64 teams are split into groups of 4, 16 of them. One academy is in each group, and then these groups are then regionalised with 8 sitting in the northern section and 8 sitting in the southern section. Each team in the group plays each other once, with the academy key teams always playing away in each time. If you get a draw, it goes straight to a penalty shootout, and the winning side of that penalty shootout gets 2 points rather than 1. The loser still gets 1 point for the draw. And then the top 2 in each group progress through to the knockout stages, which stay regionalised for the second and third rounds. And then from the quarterfinals, the remaining 8 sides just get chucked in the same pot. And the knockouts continue through to a final, once again, at Wembley Stadium. And the final domestic cup competition is the FA Trophy, which is for teams in the final 2 playable tiers, plus the 2 tiers directly below them, so tiers 7 and 8. The 48 teams from the National League North and South enter the second round proper, along with the 32 teams from the lower tiers who've qualified from the previous round. And then the 24 teams from the National League then enter the next round, and single-leg knockouts go on with no replays, heading straight through to a final, once again, at Wembley Stadium. Now, with all of that covered, it's time to have a look at 5 fantastic save ideas for England across the multiple levels of playable football. Now, trying to narrow down this list has been nigh on impossible due to the sheer scale, the massive scale of the English game in Football Manager, and the many, many narratives within it at all the different levels. You could probably pick out 10 clubs from each league that you could potentially manage. So hopefully this list covers a few of the different ideas, some obvious ones, some different. Obviously, if you are an English fan, I'd recommend starting out with your own team or starting out with your local club just to get your foot under the table. But if you've done that before, or you just want to start with one of these clubs, I've got 5 for you right now. So the first club is we're going to mention the reigning champions of the Premier League and the current league leaders, Manchester City. So City are one of the best clubs or easiest clubs to manage as a new player because they've got vast resources, great facilities, great squad. It's difficult not to do well immediately with Man City, but that wasn't always the case. Prior to their takeover in 2008 by the Abu Dhabi United Group, or the City Football Group as they're now known, they'd not seen domestic success since the 1960s. But since 2012, they have been the team to beat. They've won the Premier League title 6 times. I think they've won 4 Carabao Cups, 1 FA Cup. It's European success that's eluded them over this time. It still eludes them to this day. And that must immediately become your focus, your target, if you are to manage Manchester City and manage them over any of the other so-called Big 6 clubs. You need to keep winning the league and get somewhere in Europe. Now, next up, we've got Nottingham Forest, and this club has been long lauded as a fallen giant of English football over the past 20 years. Any save idealist will have included Nottingham Forest and try and return them to their glory, but they have returned to the Premier League this season for the first time in 23 years after winning the Championship playoffs. Now, the Reds are in a very unique position, having won more European titles than the English titles, having won the back-to-back European Cups under Brian Clough in 1979 and 1980, with their only English title coming the year before that in 1978. They've been up and down the leagues over the years, but their run to dramatically climb up the Championship en route to promotion last season gives them great momentum upon their return to the Premier League and presents you with the challenge of returning them back to glory and bringing trophies back to the City ground. Maybe advance on those 2 European Cups, probably try and get more league titles as well. But we're going to leave the top flight now. We're going to head down to League One for our next 2 clubs, so jumping over the Championship. The first of which is Plymouth Argyle. Now, Plymouth's claim to fame is that it's the biggest city in England to have never hosted top flight football. You can see the challenge immediately. Now, the Pilgrims have had several spells in the second flight over the years and will in fact return to the Championship next season after winning the current League One campaign that's just finished. And that's a feat that you must try and match immediately. That's your first challenge. And despite coming close, they've never sat at the top table of English football. Their home park stadium is one of the oldest in England and provides a challenging away day because it's the most southerly and westerly stadium in English League football. So can you do what many before you have failed to do and send Argyle back to the top? For instance, it's not back to the top, they've never been there. Back to the second tier and then advance on the second tier to the Premier League and bring Premier League football to Devon. Our next side, Port Vale, have a similar story, in fact, as they too have never played in the top flight of English football, despite 112 years as a Football League club. Over 40 of those seasons were played in the second tier, so they've been close, but not close enough, really. Their closest chase for promotion to the Premier League came with a 8th place finish, so just outside the playoffs, when in the old Division 1, the current Championship, in 96-97. More recently, the challenge has been kind of to keep the side in the Football League itself, with prolonged stints in the bottom 2 tiers, League 1 and League 2. But Vale currently find themselves towards the bottom of League 1 with that unwanted record hanging over their head. You'll probably want to try and get them into the top flight sooner rather than later. But you'll have a lot to prove should you become their next new manager. And the final club on our shortlist is, well, they're not even from England. That won't surprise you, however, because it's Wrexham. You won't be surprised to see Wrexham appear here. The Welsh side have risen to superstardom recently, despite playing non-league football, and that's due to their new owners, actors Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. Wrexham have peaked as a second-tier side in the early 80s, but their last season in the league, so the 4th tier, was as far back as 2008. Now, their new owners are in place, and they are firm favourites to return after 15 seasons, something that they've actually done in real life, having just won the National League in the season that's just culminated. But that you need to continue that rise basically up the Football League, potentially reaching the Premier League in the not too distant future. You've got great backing behind you. They're putting money into the facilities as well. So it's a club that is going to be on the rise, and you can be the one to guide them to the Premier League. So there we have it. That is a pretty whistle-stop tour of the playable English leagues on Football Manager 2023, along with 5 great save ideas. And if you are familiar with the real-life English football, which most of you probably will be, or you've managed there extensively on Football Manager, again, most of you probably will be, please head to the comments and share your thoughts, any corrections or stories of managing England. I don't think I butchered any pronunciations on this one, but let me know if I have, because you never know. Whilst you're there, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please check out more league guides like this one and all the other great content here on the channel. Thanks a lot for watching.